Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. The love story that captivated Hollywood. A love story written in light. In Hollywood, love is often built on illusion. The cameras flash, the red carpets glow. The world watches two beautiful people smile for photographs, and for a moment, it all looks perfect. But behind the glamour, behind the polished interviews and the designer clothes, some of the most famous love stories in history were far more fragile than they appeared. And few stories capture that contrast more powerfully than Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. They were not just one of the most famous couples in Hollywood. For many years, they were the golden image of romance, elegance, fame, and mystery. He was already becoming one of the biggest movie stars in the world. She was the striking Australian actress with grace, intelligence, and quiet magnetism. Together, they seemed like the kind of couple Hollywood was built to worship. They looked flawless from the outside. But as with so many legendary love stories, the truth was more complicated, more emotional, and more human than the headlines could ever express. This is not just the story of two stars who fell in love. It is the story of timing, fame, ambition, devotion, pressure, family, and loss. It is the story of a marriage that once looked untouchable and yet slowly cracked under the weight of everything surrounding it. This is the dramatic love story of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. The meeting that changed everything. Their story began in the late 1980s, when Nicole Kidman was still rising in the international film world and Tom Cruise was already a major Hollywood force. They met while preparing for the racing drama Days of Thunder. At the time, Tom Cruise was one of the most desired leading men in the world. He had charisma, confidence, ambition, and the kind of movie star aura that could dominate any room. Nicole, meanwhile, had a different kind of presence. She was elegant, cool, intensely talented, and impossible to ignore. When they met, there was something immediate. Not loud, not theatrical, but undeniable. Nicole later spoke about how young she was when she fell in love. Tom, too, seemed drawn to her in a way that went beyond publicity or studio chemistry. What started as an on-set connection quickly became something deeper. In Hollywood, romances often appear suddenly and disappear just as fast. But this one moved with astonishing speed. They were married in 1990. It happened so fast that it felt like the script of a romantic film. Two beautiful stars meet on a movie set, fall in love, and begin a life together under the constant gaze of the world. It was the kind of story magazines lived for. And almost instantly, they became one of the most talked about couples on Earth. The golden couple of the 1990s. There was a time when Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman seemed almost untouchable. Throughout the 1990s, they represented something rare in Hollywood, a couple that looked glamorous, powerful, and stable all at once. They appeared at premieres with effortless elegance. They were photographed smiling, laughing, holding each other close. There was style, mystery, and real chemistry between them. But more than that, there was balance. Tom was intense, driven, and globally famous. Nicole was poised, thoughtful, and increasingly admired for her own talent. She was never just standing beside him. She was becoming a major star in her own right. That made them even more fascinating. They were not simply a celebrity couple. They were two ambitious artists sharing a marriage at the highest level of fame. To the public, they looked like the dream. They worked together again. They built a life. They adopted children and created a family. For many fans, their love story felt real in a way that many celebrity romances never do. There was something about them that seemed deeper than tabloid attraction. Something serious. Something enduring. And that may be why their eventual ending felt so shocking. Because before the collapse, there was a long season when the world truly believed they might last forever. Love inside the pressure of fame. But fame changes everything. It changes how people move, how they trust, how they speak, and how they protect themselves. And when two people are both world famous, the pressure is multiplied. Every appearance becomes a statement. Every silence becomes a rumor. Every small shift becomes a headline. Tom and Nicole were living inside that pressure constantly. He was one of the biggest stars in the world, carrying the demands of blockbuster fame. She was evolving artistically, taking on deeper and more challenging roles. Their lives were not normal in any sense. Their schedules were punishing. Their marriage existed under a microscope. And then there was the emotional cost of trying to remain a couple while the entire world projected stories onto you. In public, they often looked united. But private life is never as simple as public appearance. A marriage can be full of love and still be full of strain. Two people can deeply care for each other and still slowly begin to change in different directions. That is the tragedy at the heart of many great love stories. It is not always betrayal. It is not always hatred. Sometimes it is distance. Sometimes it is pressure. Sometimes it is two people trying very hard to hold on to something beautiful while life keeps pulling them apart. And in the case of Tom and Nicole, the outside world only saw the polished version. The real emotional weight remained hidden. Eyes wide shut and the strange beauty of intimacy. One of the most haunting chapters in their story came when they starred together in Eyes Wide Shut, directed by Stanley Kubrick. The film itself was dark, intimate, unsettling, and emotionally intense. It explored jealousy, desire, secrecy, power, marriage, and temptation. In many ways, it was the perfect storm for a real-life couple already living under extraordinary pressure. Tom and Nicole spent a long time making that film. The production was famously demanding and emotionally consuming. They were not simply acting in a love story. They were inhabiting a world of psychological tension and marital unease. Every scene required vulnerability. Every moment asked for emotional exposure. And because they were married in real life, audiences could not help but watch the film through that lens. Were they drawing from their real marriage? Were the emotions on screen connected to something private? Was art beginning to blur into life? Those questions only deepened the public fascination. Years later, Eyes Wide Shut would feel almost ghostly when viewed in the context of their relationship. It became one of those rare films that seems permanently tied to the emotional mythology of the people inside it. Watching them together in that story now feels like watching something intimate and fragile preserved in cinema. There is beauty in that, but there is also sadness. Because sometimes the most unforgettable screen chemistry comes from something real that is already beginning to break. A marriage the world thought would last. By the late 1990s, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman had been together for years. They had survived the early scrutiny, built a family, worked together, and maintained their place as one of the most admired couples in entertainment. From the outside, they had everything: fame, wealth, beauty, influence, a family, respect. And perhaps that is exactly why their breakup stunned so many people. The public did not see an obvious collapse coming. There was no long public war. No dramatic public unraveling at first. Instead, when the news came, it landed like a shockwave. A couple so iconic that they seemed almost permanent was suddenly over. For fans, it felt deeply unsettling. Because if even they could not make it, what chance did anyone have inside the machinery of Hollywood? But behind that question was another, more human one. What happened between them? Why did something that once looked so strong come to an end? The truth, as always, remained partly private. And perhaps that privacy is important. Not every heartbreak can be fully explained by outsiders. Not every ending fits a simple narrative. But what the world could feel was the emotional force of it. This was not just another celebrity divorce. This was the end of an era. The pain of the ending. When their marriage ended in 2001, the separation seemed to carry a deep emotional charge. Nicole Kidman later spoke in ways that suggested genuine heartbreak. There was pain in how the story ended, and that pain became impossible to ignore. The glamour faded, and in its place was something more raw: grief. That is what made their story resonate beyond celebrity culture. People were not just watching two famous actors separate. They were witnessing the collapse of a dream they had emotionally invested in. For years, Tom and Nicole had represented a certain kind of ideal. When that ideal shattered, it felt personal to many who had believed in them. For Nicole especially, the years after the breakup seemed to reveal just how profound the loss had been. She emerged not only as a major actress, but as a woman rebuilding herself after the collapse of one of the most public marriages in the world. And that transformation became part of the legend of this love story. Because some love stories are remembered for how beautifully they begin. Others are remembered for how painfully they end. Tom and Nicole became unforgettable because they were both. After the fall, reinvention and distance. After their separation, their lives moved in different directions. Tom Cruise remained a global movie star, continuing to dominate the box office and maintain the intense, controlled image that had defined much of his career. Nicole Kidman, on the other hand, entered a new artistic era. She gave powerful performances, won major acclaim, and seemed to step into a deeper, more independent phase of her identity. It was as if the end of the marriage forced a kind of rebirth. And that is often what makes a great love story tragic. The ending does not erase the love. It transforms it into memory, into consequence, into the person each lover becomes afterward. They did not remain the dazzling young couple from the red carpet photographs. Time changed that. Life changed that. But the image remained. Tom and Nicole standing together at premieres. Tom and Nicole smiling under flashing lights. Tom and Nicole is the embodiment of movie star romance. That image never fully disappeared, even as real life moved on. Because some couples become larger than the relationship itself. They become symbols. And once that happens, their love story is no longer just theirs. It belongs partly to public memory. Why their love story still fascinates the world. So why does this story still matter? Why do people still talk about Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman after all these years? Because their story contains all the ingredients of classic cinematic romance. Attraction, beauty, fame, marriage, family, artistic collaboration, mystery, heartbreak, reinvention. But beyond that, it reflects a deeper truth about love itself. Even the most glamorous relationships are vulnerable. Even the most admired couples can be carrying invisible pain. Even people who seem to have everything can lose the one thing the public assumed was secure. There is something strangely comforting and heartbreaking in that truth. It reminds us that love does not obey fame. It does not respect status. It cannot be protected by red carpets or success or public admiration. Love remains human, fragile, and unpredictable no matter how famous the people are. And perhaps that is why the story of Tom and Nicole has lasted. Because behind the celebrity mythology, it feels real. It feels like two people who truly matter to each other. Two people who once built a life. Two people who could not hold on to it forever. The legacy of a Hollywood love story. Today, the story of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman exists somewhere between history and legend. It is remembered through old interviews, red carpet photographs, film scenes, award show appearances, and the emotional echo of an era when they seemed to define Hollywood romance. Younger audiences may discover them through clips and headlines. Older audiences remember the impact in real time. And still, the same feeling remains. Wonder. How did something so powerful begin so fast? How did something so admired end so suddenly? What do they truly mean to each other behind closed doors, away from cameras and public expectation? Those questions may never be fully answered. But perhaps that mystery is part of what gives their story its lasting power. Some love stories survive because they end happily. Others survive because they remain unresolved in the public imagination. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman belong to the second kind. Their story was dazzling, romantic, elegant, and painful. It carried the shine of movie stardom and the sorrow of human heartbreak. It gave Hollywood one of its most unforgettable couples, and then reminded the world that even legends can break apart. In the end, maybe that is why their love story still feels so haunting. Because for one extraordinary chapter in time, they really did look like forever. And then, suddenly, they were not. That is what makes it unforgettable. That is what makes it tragic. And that is what makes Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman one of Hollywood's most iconic love stories of all time.